Hello viewers, welcome to Tradabulls. So Nifty weekend candle closed somewhere 24,150 level. So this week the range was about 700 points. So low was 23,816 and high was 24,534 levels. So entire week with huge volatility. So downside week around 350 points and upside week also around 350 points. So finally the weekend candle was closed with somewhat spinning top candle. So generally spinning tops usually forms at trend ending levels. So now almost all from last 6 weeks we are in downtrend. So maybe here there is a pause for the downtrend. So we may expect some trend arrest, and at least 50% of the retracement market is expecting. So at least 25,050 level would be the next target until and unless we maintain that recent low, that is 23,800 level. So coming to overall indices, Nifty was closed with bearish plus, Bank Nifty was closed with bearish plus, IT was bearish plus, Fin Nifty bearish plus, mid cap closed with neutral, and major talk of the town Reliance. So Reliance again it was closed with another 1.7% negative. So overall this week the overall loss for Reliance was around more than 4%. So 4%, it's a huge. So Reliance is one of the highest weightage counters in Nifty 50. That's why major impact was created for Nifty's major impact was created by Reliance only. And overall this week Nifty lost by around negative 0.64%, whereas banks lost by around negative 0.22%, and IT it's 4% up. So IT was closed with very strong note above 42,000 mark, and Fin Nifty was lost by around 0.22%, and mid cap was up by around 1.5%. So overall, when we compare with Nifty and mid cap Nifty, Nifty was lost by around 0.6%, whereas mid cap select was up by around 1.5% throughout this week. So coming to charts, so this weekly candle close was very close to last 2 weeks low or last 2 weeks close. So one great thing was this week Nifty was broken 24,000 level, but week close candle was closed above 24,000 mark. So last 3 weeks low is also maintained at 24,100 to 150 levels. So consecutively 3 weeks are having similar kind of lows or nearby nearest closing points. So this week 24,830 was indicated as midterm resistance. So we may expect somewhat midterm resistance, midterm as the target for the next week for upside. Whereas in downside, if it breaks 24,800 mark, so we may expect till 22,800 levels. So 23,650 is indicating 10%, minus 10% level from the recent high, that is 26,227. So from 26,227, 10% is equal to 23,650 level. So if it breaks this week's low, that is 23,800 levels, so we may expect another 1,000 points downside till 22,800. Either 22,800 downside or 25,050, and 25,050 was indicated 50% mean reversion of the latest trend. If it closes above 25,050, we may expect Nifty to retest the all-time high, that is 26,277 levels. So short-term trend was closed with positive note. So since last 3 days, Nifty was closed above short-term trend towards positive side, and midterm trend, still it is in negative side. So this is consecutively fifth week, not fifth week, sixth week. So 6 weeks completely it was below that midterm trend, and 24,830 is indicating the midterm resistance, whereas still it is maintaining the long term. So both short term trend and long term trends are at 24,050 levels. Any weekly candle, if it closes below 24,050 levels, so we may expect Nifty to reach 22,800 levels. So coming to Bank Nifty, so Bank Nifty short term trend was closed in negative today. So last 7 days or 8 days it was closed above short term trend, but today first time after 8-9 sessions, so Bank Nifty was closed below short term trend, whereas mid-term trend already it's in negative. So this is consecutively 6th week for both Bank Nifty as well as Nifty. Short term mid-term trend was, this is continuously 6th week, so mid-term trend was somewhat negative side. So for banks, mid-term trend is indicating somewhere 52,650 level. So this week candle was somewhat closed above 51,500 mark. So we may expect at least 52,650 level, so coming week. Whereas long-term trend, it is clearly indicating 48,900 levels. So very far away for the long-term trend. So long-term trend is very much positive for Bank Nifty. Whereas IT mid-term trend is still it's in negative, whereas short-term trend is positive, and short-term trend is positive and long-term trend is also positive. So here trends are most important. So for all major indices, mid-term trend is very much weakened. So here Nifty short-term trend is upside, mid-term trend is downside, and long-term trend is upside. So Bank Nifty short-term trend also downside, mid-term trend is downside, and long-term trend is upside. Whereas IT short-term trend is upside, mid-term trend is downside, and long-term trend is upside. And Reliance, so all three trends were closed towards downside. So one common thing for all these major indices and the Reliance counter, all mid-term trends are indicating towards downside only. Maybe in the meantime, we may expect some technical bounces, that is mean reversion, 50% of the recent swing, but from there also we may expect some downside. So either market may expect some technical bounce or towards negative side. So for Nifty, the major points, the major technical levels would be 23,800 levels. So this week, if it breaks that level, the recent lows, another 1,000 points risk is there for Nifty. Whereas if it breaks 24,850 level, so it may retest again the recent high. Now coming to the major indices. So Nifty was closed with a very tight range. So around 200 points range was created for intraday. And the important closing was 24,150 level. And last month's low was 24,074. So 24,074 is 0% of last month's range. And the next probable numbers would be 24,500, 24,775, 24,990 levels. So if it goes towards positive side, so 25,000, 25,050 would be the major resistance point. Whereas downside, if it breaks 24,074, we may expect till 23,640 and 23,373 levels. So for banks, today's close was above 51,500 level. So when we compare last month's range, 51,355 was the 38.2% of the golden ratio. So as long as it holds that 38.2% level, that is 51,335, So the probable numbers would be 51,714, 52,074, 52,584 levels. For IT, this week IT was up by around 4%, and today's close was about 42,000 level. And when we compare the levels with the last month's range, so very close to 61.8% of last month's range, so just below to 61.8%. So the next probable numbers in IT would be 42,658, 43,330 and 44,000 levels. So all three major indices, midterm trends are towards downside only. So next week we may expect some technical bounce towards upside. If it fails to hold that, cross that midterm trends, so somewhat negativity may continue towards downside. And major indices sentiment wise, so today's Nifty was 27 out of 50 was negative and 23 out of 50 were positive. So Infosys, M&M, HDFC Bank were closer towards positive, whereas Reliance, ICICI Bank and SBI were downside. So major impact for Nifty was with Reliance only. So Reliance, so today's contribution was negative 35 points, and this week Reliance contribution was around 85 points. So this week Nifty lost by around 150 points. Out of that 150 points, Reliance was contributed half of the negative points, that is 85 points. And banks, so today's banks sentiment wise 9 out of 12 towards negative, whereas 3 out of 12 were positive. So positive side HDFC Bank, Federal Bank and Axis Bank. Towards negative ICICI Bank, SBI and AU Bank. So today's major contribution from banking side towards negative was by ICICI Bank with 194 points. Whereas weekly, so half of the counters towards positive and remaining half towards positive. So SBI, HDFC Bank, PNB, Federal Bank, Bank of Baroda, Kotak Bank, all these are all towards positive side, whereas negative side majorly with ICICI Bank, AU Bank and Axis Bank. So comparatively public sector and private sector banks, so public sector banks are doing well. So SBI was contributed about 140 points, PNB was around 40 points contribution. Coming to IT, so today's IT TCS and Persistent was towards downside, whereas Infosys was strongly upside and also Tech Mahindra also towards positive side. This week only emphasis was downside, remaining 9 IT counters were towards upside only. Coming to index top 10s, so Nifty was closed by 4 out of 10 negative counters. So this week all major heavy weights, if you consider, HDFC Bank was up by around 1%, Reliance was down by 4%, ICICI Bank was down by 2.5%, Infosys was up by around 4%, ITC was down by 2.5%, Bharati Airtel was down by around 3%, TCS was up by around 4%, L&T was up by around 1%, Axis Bank was down by around negative 0.74% and SBI was up by around 2.67%. Among all top 10s, so TCS was more than 4%, Infosys was around 4% up, and HDFC Bank was around 1% and SBI was around 2.67%. So coming from all the top 10s, IT was the industry leaders, both Infosys and TCS was up by 4% this week, and from bankings, so more than 2.5% was up by SBI and HDFC Bank was up by around 1%. So towards negative, major impact by Reliance. Reliance was down by around 4% and ICICI Bank is also down by more than 2.5%. So these two counters majorly damaged Nifty, and at least IT pack was saved. So Nifty at least survived with IT pack. So coming to banks, so the major counters, so for both intraday as well as weekly data, so banks majorly towards downside. So this week HDFC Bank was up by around 1%, ICICI Bank was down by around 2.5%. So Kotak was closed with flat note, Axis Bank around minus 0.74%. SBI was around 2.5% up. So IndusInd Bank was negative 0.8%. Bank of Baroda was up by around 1.14%. PNB was up by around 3.75%. Among all banks, PNB was superb. This one percentages towards nearly 4% up this week. And IT, both intraday as well as weekly data is indicating towards positive. So majorly Infosys and TCS up by 4% each, whereas HCL Tech more than 4.5% up, Tech Mahindra around 5% up, Wipro around 3.2% up, LTI Mindtree was up by around 3.5%, Persistent Systems was up by more than 5%, Coforge was up by more than 5.3%. Emphasis is the only counter from IT Pack which was closed with negative bias, negative 1.24%, whereas LTTS is also up by around 2.87%. So talk of this week was IT Pack. So industry leaders also up by 4%, and even the remaining counters are also on an average more than 4% up. So coming to heat maps. So today's the best performers was M&M and Titan, each up by 2% and 3%, whereas downside Trent was down by around 3%, Coal India was around by 2.6%, and Asian Paints was around 2.6%. So this week the best performers was M&M and Apollo Hospitals, each up by 5.5%. So next, Tech Mahindra, HCL Tech was up by around 5%, 4.5% to 5%, and TCS and Infosys was up by around 4%. So major damage from Trent, around 11% down this week, and Coal India around 6.5% down, Hindalco was around 6%, Asian Paints also around 6%, Grasim is also around 5.7% downside. So indices wise, so the best performers was IT and Mid Cap Select, whereas so this week IT and Mid Cap Select was doing well, whereas Bank Nifty, Fin Nifty towards negative side, and Nifty was down by around 0.64%, and next 50 is also down by around 1%. So compared to previous range, so 21 counters closed last week. 21 was negative and 16 was positive, and monthly still it is indicating negative. 35 was towards negative and 8 counters are towards positive. And banking also 4 were closed negative and 5 were closed positive, whereas monthly data 6 are indicating negative and 5 are indicating positive. So that's all about this week analysis. And next week I'm going on leave, so entire week we are not going to do any videos. So next we will meet on somewhere 18th November. So that's all about today's analysis, especially for Nifty. So 24,000 mark is maintaining since last 3 weeks. So we may expect some technical bounce or mean reversion towards 25,000. So from here another 850 points is left over. So downside 23,800 levels is most important. If it breaks and closes below that level, we may expect till 22,800 levels. So that's all about today's analysis. We'll meet on 18th analysis video. Thank you so much.